the ISPE in general. I personally learned a lot in the past almost, 3 years now. Participated, reviewed, authored, connected, networked. It's just an amazing network. You'll benefit tremendously, trust me. And again, the intent of this specific interest group is practical guidance, learn from experts. I know many experts on the call. Interaction. I hope we just don't leave it to this call only. I think let's keep the interaction. I see sometimes feeds coming in, questions. Let's open those discussions. Let's keep them moving. I'm guilty as sin. I don't read every single one of them, but I think we just need to make the time to do that. Build connections. I think it's very important for all of us, career-wise, and also, learning. And then share your experiences, whether good, bad, or ugly. I think it's important. All right. All righty. So just gonna kick it off here a little bit, and we'll have Cisco respond, and then, but really I want input and feedback from others, from anyone, whatever that topic is. And if the question is not the correct questions, you know what? I want you guys to correct us, right? And give us ideas, because we want to broadcast the message, the correct message across the industry. So despite the FDA's effort to provide clear, consistent approaches to Part 11 compliance, manufacturers continue to express significant concerns regarding the regulation when applying CSA. And just a disclosure, CSA is a methodology, right? It's still computer system validation. Validation is not going away, correct? I'm not sure why the concern at this time. However, I think we need to take everything into consideration. Now, some of these concerns relate to the methodology, because the minute you mention unscripted testing, right, or it's a risk-based approach, oh, we're doing less, we're documenting less. Now, is Part 11 is going to be impacted, right? We've always scripted test every single requirement of Part 11. Well, we did this back in 1997, right? Many of the systems at the time did not have the technology that it has today. So I'll keep it at that. So really my question, I want to kick it off to Cisco. What type of clarification can we, when I say we, it's really the industry and the regulators, right? Because the regulators, they come to us to, hey guys, what do you think, right? They're not just making the decisions for us. They're giving us the tools. But I think it's us that we want to help ourselves, right? How can we ease the manufacturer's confusion and concerns and answer some of those questions? So back to you, Mr. Vicente.
Yeah, great. No pressure here to start. So this is an interesting one, because from our standpoint, right, the idea of I think the scope and guidance, the scope document that came out for the Part 11 application clearly states that we're not going to impose any additional validation requirements for Part 11 other than whatever is required by the predicate rule, right? Which is 82070I or the 210 is it 211.60 211.60F, something in that range. I need to be more familiar with that one. So, and all they require, again, is the idea of incorporating, what is a awareness and need, going back to the notion of critical thinking, of when certain records are going to be used to meet an agency requirement under Part 11, right? So I think, to me, the idea of what needs to be done here to clarify things is for people to stop overthinking or over attributing any data they collect and how it's collected as what is the record that comes into scope of Part 11. And then everything else is just, that common sense approach. going to be submitting this to the agency, then I need to make sure that there is some integrity to the data going through, right? And how do I go about doing that as part of the assurance validation requirements?
Absolutely. Awesome. I'm going to open it up to anyone, not panel, in the meeting. Please ask your question.
This is Lori. I'm going to
Hello.
play devil's advocate, Cisco,
Awesome.
because everybody then goes, oh, but I need training records because I need to prove that people are trained. So obviously I need to validate my training system. And I need to collect testing because testing is required to show that the system works. So I need to validate my testing system. So
actually, that's fair, and I appreciate that. So yeah, you do, and this is let's say independent of work here, right? The idea here is you need to validate your training system, right? Because that's where you're storing a specific set of records, independent of Part 11 or not, right? You want to make sure that that system does what it needs to do, maintains the record for whatever training was delivered. What the guidance and scope for Part 11 said is you don't have to do anything more than what you did there to say you're compliant.
Right.
So it's the idea of, again, going back to something we've said beforehand, take credit for what you already do. And you've already done that bit of work. But I appreciate that the devil's advocate, because I'd like to understand really where the biggest disconnect are if we've got an opportunity to address that in a future state.
thank you.
Any more comments or questions to that specific one? I know you'll have additional. Okay. Thank you, Cisco. Thank you, Lori. So here we get to the fear, which is somewhat related, Cisco, and we've talked about it before, right? There seems to be that lack of direct alignment between CSA and Part 11. And from a FICSA team perspective, we are kind of aware that specific section needs to be updated. Well, guess what? Also, Part 11 need to be updated sometime down the road, and we'll get to that question a little later. But I think this is really what's causing the concerns and the confusion among manufacturers, right? And I've heard it from many folks, and that's why I'm posing this question here. Could CSA cause manufacturers to be cited for not following the regulations? I do have an answer all the way at the end. I'm not going to share it now, but I would really like to hear you, and also I want to hear from the industry. Did they really think so, and why?
So here's going to be my response. No. And it really shouldn't, right? That's, again, nothing in the regulation is changing by what we've said or done here, right? All we've stated is here is an approach that is acceptable from an agency standpoint that lets you be a little bit more risk-based and flexible. But the regulation underlying it, right, doesn't change. So there's nothing here in CSA that would cause you to be cited for not following the regulations. It might cause you to be cited for not following your own procedures, right? Because that's how those sites happen. So always make sure you're keeping your processes aligned with what you're actually doing.
So I'm going to wait for a devil's advocate to speak. Lori, do you have a counter?
I was going to, you knew that.
Okay, there you go. That's what I'm waiting for. So go ahead.
And I really would like other people to speak up and ask questions because I'm sure these are not black and white answers.
No, absolutely not.
And you have to think, because I had to say that.
Mhm.
But what happens when people say, but I manufacture internationally, and how are international regulators going to address this? And again, I am playing devil's advocate. None of these opinions are mine.
Absolutely appreciate it. Completely 100%. So I still go back to the notion, even internationally, right? What is the foundational regulation? And it all depends, I think, on what they're using as the, I guess, the base requirement. Whether it's 820. If you're following 13485, you're actually in much better shape to be to make the adjustment to apply CSA, because it's explicit in the requirement that you do a approach that's commensurate with the risk. When we talk about other potential global regulations, it's always going back to not what the experience has been with auditors and their approach or interpretation of things, but what is the foundational regulation requiring? Because that's what you're going to be cited on. And most of them, even internationally, have a lot of flexibility and broadness to how they can be interpreted. You're
not saying that regulations don't actually say that you need to generate reams and reams of useless documentation?
Not saying that I've seen. Now, I'm not versed in all of the international regulations, right?
There may be one out there. Okay.
So he was, the one examples that I've been asked that question also from some of our friends. Basically, part 11, a lot of manufacturers, they decide, you know what, I'm gonna do scripted testing for everything, whatever that function is, whether it's high, medium, or low. I'm testing everything because I don't want the headache when an inspector comes in and asks me to prove that I've done my about 11 testing and I met all the requirements, right? What's your thought on that? Really, do we really at this time and age, right, with all the advanced technology, still need to go through all of this? Is there a better way of doing it? And again, this is where really this came from. Could applying CSA with the least burdensome approach to documentation cause us to get cited? I think that's the fear that we hear from various folks in the industry. And this question, by the way, this is not to Cisco, this is to anyone on the call. Please, I need you to chime in and tell us your thoughts.
Hey, Khaled, it's Grace Shaw. So I'm wondering, right, through all this messaging and conversation and all of these presentations and conferences, it's really about how are we helping people define and explain what it is that they're doing, and then be ready to present that and explain it during an audit and feel comfortable during that audit. I don't hear a lot of that side of the conversation. I think we touch on it, and then people get bogged down in the little nuances of what it means to shift to better testing, and kind of forget that piece of documenting your position and how you're going to move forward with that approach.
That's a really interesting point, because most companies, the person who made a decision and probably didn't document it, as you rightly point out, then has moved on. So the person left holding the bag probably doesn't have the background to support the decisions that were made. I think that's a really interesting point.
And I completely appreciate the point being made, because I think that's underlying everything. That's the root of the issue. And even with regards to what we did with CSA in laying out the framework in the sense of risk, intended use, risk, right, the testing activities, and then trying to highlight, right, that honestly, if you can explain that to anyone, it doesn't matter which auditor you're in what country, start with that risk discussion, they will get it. They will understand what you need, and they don't need to see the reams of paper. They need to understand that you've demonstrated you're in control. So that idea of better framing how to have a conversation is, I think, how you go about tackling this fear issue. And I get it that at some point in time somebody made a decision, but I think that's the piece that when we talk about what's required for documentation, those are the ones that matter, and they don't need to be reams of paper.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. I just want to throw this one out there. And again,
I think there's a hand up too.
oh, I'm sorry, I can't see the other screen. So thank you for that. Yes, be my navigator. Go ahead, please.
I'm one of the hands up. I give a course with another ISPE member, and we're saying when it says unscripted testing, it doesn't actually mean undocumented testing, and so there should be a rationale written down, shouldn't there? There should be a plan for what's going to be heavily scripted, approved tests that are done in the kind of old-fashioned way. You know, that's your 20%, and maybe using the risk assessment to channel us into those tests. And then something that's an unscripted test still needs to document lightly what testing was actually happening, so that, you know, you would do that in any industry. We need to know that we've tested everything, and that the functionality that we're showing in front of us is tested, but we don't need to have that heavy level of testing and validation and loads of attachments on that testing. And to me, that's the difference. But I'd like to see if people agree with that. And also, when we're talking about an unscripted test, it's not undocumented. We're not having no record of the tests that are happening. And that's where we're positioning it for our ISPE course. So would people agree with that approach?
Love it. Thank you.
100%.
Okay, that makes me feel a lot better. So we're not saying we're not testing, and we're not saying we're not collecting evidence of testing. And that's a message I'm not hearing. You know, we're still having a trail of paper. It's just
Yes.
a lot more crumbs rather than, you know, a great big meal to digest.
Yeah,
That was perfect. Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
yeah. I guess one thing is I actually sat down and I reread the doc before today. Table 1 on, I think, starting on page 16, and then there's an example after that is pretty spectacular in laying out in really explicit manner like what the expectations are. So I think, you know, if there's people saying, well, I'm not sure what's expected, I think if you'll just reference them to table 1 in the doc, it's really clear, and it actually makes it easy on us. So that's kind of a comment. And then one question I have, I guess, for the group at large is, you know, I've got a background, you know, the last 4 or 5 years with an OEM, an equipment supplier. And one of the things the equipment suppliers have used to set boundaries with customers is to say, hey, this is our formal testing. And so this is what we're going to do during FAT. Now, if you want to play around with the system and learn, we can do that, but this is our formal testing. As an OEM, I can see some concern with customers coming in and saying, hey, the FDA is saying we should do ad hoc and error guessing. So let's spend the next 4 days just sort of banging on the machine in random ways because we're supposed to do that also. So that actually feels very open-ended. And I'm just wondering if there's anyone from a supplier standpoint who's kind of thought about that or thought about ways to address that with end users.
I personally love the concept. So go ahead, Hillary.
Yeah. Sorry to go on, but yes, as a supplier, that's exactly what we do. We'll go through a formal test, we'll finish a FAT, and then some of our customers are saying we'd like playtime, and we would give them a period of time when we can support them. So obviously it has to be under the contract, doesn't it?
Sure.
We can support them. We would raise deviations if they did find anything. And that's post the more formal FAT that they're going to leverage.
Okay, so then what you're saying then is you do You do have a certain, bounded time set aside, but you will still classify that as, hey, we're still testing and we can raise, deviations under the testing process.
Yeah.
Okay, but you just time bounded that.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
and that's their decision. To be honest, where I see this hitting us more is customers saying, right, we haven't got the manpower, so under the supplier assessment, we're going to say you do the testing and we're not witnessing it. And that's where I see the boundary coming, that when they're really, really keen to see something because of it's a critical aspect, they'll come and witness a test. And so we're seeing some customers putting a really focused but much lighter witnessing effort on the testing, rather than saying, yes, we'll do all of that testing and then we'll do some extra. We're not seeing that so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you both, actually, Andy and Hillary. Thank you for that, because really the idea is for CSE to be contagious, right? I know we keep talking about CSA from an enterprise non-product software, but I'm gonna shift it back to Cisco, because I've heard him speaking in various events about how CSA is really the platform, right, for advanced manufacturing. So it is literally the tip of the iceberg. So Cisco, just share some of that thoughts and the feedback you've received in various conferences and meetings.
Yes, I think part of our just ongoing effort to really try to drive a more significant focus on quality versus just a focus on compliance, which has been the standing point. This applies across to all aspects of the regulation for medical devices. We wanted and want companies to be applying and thinking through their processes and being lean about them, right? They're better, cleaner processes. They end and provide better results for the product and down the road to patients, right? Automation is key to that, right? The agency recognized that a while back. What we ran into was the fact that a lot of companies in the life science industries weren't investing in the automation, right? Leveraging and pulling in that increased data connectivity, better control, better systems to monitor and maintain. So, we wanted to try to encourage that, went on the road, went to the conferences to try to support encouraging that. And again, the kickoff for all CSA was the fact that we heard clearly that a lot of the investment wasn't happening because of the validation issues or the validation concerns or the validation fear, the validation cost, which was never our intent, right? This has been about at least clearing that first obstacle, but the end goal really is we want to support companies in general being more, I think, digitally capable, more embracing of that technology and automation and driving some of those benefits and things that we see in other industries and how they operate based on that capability to the life sciences space, where I think, we all talk about the fact that it's all patient risk and patient impacting. It makes a lot more sense for us to be using and leveraging those capabilities than in some of the other industries I've seen.
Thank you, sir. Okay, it's interesting. Anytime we start talking about a topic related to CSA, we end up back talking about CSA and some stuff that we've really kind of exhausted and spoke about. So I want to bring us back to part 11, right? Because again, I really want to bring us back to, because I know there are certain things that we are still looking under the hood that we haven't really figured out, right? And the reason why I want to bring this back here, my friend Ken Shitamoto actually put that question and left. Given validation for part 11, scope and application has been under enforcement discretion for nearly 20 years. And the question was all of this much to do about nothing, right? Is this now we're going a different direction? Are we, I guess, what should be really worried about, right? Should be worried about the transition from the CSV to CSA, should be, and part 11, how can we strengthen that? So Cisco, I know you kind of answered that question last time in the webinar, and Daniel also pitched in. Just kick it off for us. And again, please, everyone on the call, just chime in and give me, and I'm not looking for an answer, I'm looking for engagement.
So I think when we talked about this, from my standpoint, I do think foundationally, a lot of this has been a situation where it is all kind of much to do about nothing. But in fairness, we as an agency never clearly said anything or reset that. And at the same time, as industry started applying more of these, I don't know, these practices or controls on themselves, we as an agency never said, stop, you're doing too much, right? Then we own that. But that I think we had an understanding or an idea that maybe this was not as complicated as it evolved, or that our original thinking was clear. I don't think we ever thought that this was going to be something that cascaded to this point. Now, we do own a piece of allowing it to get there, and that's kind of what we're trying to deal with.
That's almost a segue for the next question, but I'll wait.
So you knew I had to say something.
Of course.
And again, playing devil's advocate. As an auditor, when I audit someone, if someone says they have to do A through Z, and in my brain, I think they have to do A and B, I'm not going to argue with them if that's what they feel they need to do for control. So I think it's kind of a two-edged sword.
It is. Mm-hmm.
How can, you can't actually hold someone for doing something that they think they're saying is necessary. And the other thing, and I think it feeds into something you said earlier, was very much the idea that it's that same thing. We over-engineered our procedures, and then we're following this over-engineered procedure. You're looking at us against those procedures because that's what we're saying we're going to do. Where can we go from there?
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct.
And that's what I think the CSA idea really, to me, was like a stopping point to say people, hey, go back, look at your procedures, look at your processes, look at what you're doing, and think about what you're doing. Maybe you've over-engineered them.
And I think, you hit something on the head that was part of the foundational issue, right? As investigators, as auditors, FDA is going to look at whatever you've established at the process you've established. However you thought, the appropriate controls were, as you said, it could be A through Z that you put in when only A and B were needed. But we're not in that position to be able to individually state you should just do A and B if you really feel you need A through Z. But these discussions, this education, this this collective group, and I think in a lot of cases, even the people who are here now and providing some of these expertise in these companies, you do have that capability to say, hey, great, you got A through Z, but is it really giving you control? Because here's where it could possibly have other issues, or is adding some unintended consequence.
Yeah.
I guess I would want to challenge that, Cisco. So,
Mm-hmm.
At what point we've got 25 plus years of stacks upon stacks of audit responses, and those knee-jerk responses in that first 24 hours, I'm out on the manufacturing floor and the FDA's here, and I've got to do something. I've got to do something.
Yep.
And so then that something gets stacked on top of the last something I did, and that's how we get all of those extra letters of unnecessary controls. at what point is there just a reset? Hey, this is something that you probably thought that you needed, and here we are together to collectively think what are the best controls to put in place. Like what, and I see it happening, right? I see the forums
all the time.
and the conversations happening. I see it. I see it. How do we invite that more and get the manufacturers to feel more comfortable having those conversations?
I actually am very open to suggestions, because I think we'd like to figure out how we can help facilitate that, right? Because you're correct. That's been the response. You create a system, it has an issue, because all systems do, right? It doesn't matter how well you think you've got it, something will always fall out or be missed. But the response is to add an extra control point, an extra stack, as you mentioned beforehand. And sometimes the right answer is, let's pause. Maybe there's too many stacks and too many control points, and we need to scale this back to what is something that an individual can follow, right? That's just human nature, right? And make it easier for the process, or automate that process, or take some of these points of error away from the process and figure out something else. A revisit, more than just a stack. I think you are correct in saying that just collectively, the behavior in industry for fear of the audit or the observation is to respond as quickly as possible. And oftentimes the easiest solution is just to add a stack.
Yeah, and those easy solutions are, compound and compound.
Right.
And somebody's quick decision several years ago, we don't know why they made that decision. And so now we're going to just go with it.
Yep.
So yeah, we need to clone you, Cisco. And
no, I think you guys could do that, but it's an idea that is, you're correct. And we need to just be more open to advising and getting companies to understand that maybe what they need to do is just pause and step back and look at a better way to do it.
Yeah.
Sorry, we just had that very conversation, the difference between auditing and advising and where that line is. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, having been on kind of multiple sides of this, kind of the asset owner and the supplier and the integrator side, something I think would have been very helpful for me is, again, much like the CSA guidance, where you've got numerous very discrete specific examples. And I'm thinking in part 11, one of the classic things is, well, you've always got to treat alarm acknowledgments and comments and responses. Well, that's a part 11 record. And there's a gazillion of them you could go through, but is there a guidance document out there that actually walks through a lot of different scenarios, and it says, alarm acknowledgement, yes or no, is that a part 11 record? User logins, successful user logins, yes or no? I think that could be very helpful, because as we've alluded to, in general, the manufacturers are always tend to default to the most extreme interpretation. And then we just, everyone else just has to follow suit. So that to me would be helpful as someone who has to implement the tooling to meet the Part 11 requirements.
So I think that idea notion is a brilliant suggestion. It's something that even early on when we talked about CSA, before we talked about a guidance, we thought would be a better avenue, right, is to create. And the catch here is, the minute we do it ourselves as an agency, it becomes policy guidance. It's a process, right? Now, an external group, a collective, a body of knowledge that puts that stuff together that we can even then reference is much faster, more agile, and probably more attuned to provide that relevant example for companies than going through a guidance process. So 100% agree. I think that's a absolutely phenomenal idea and creating that resource is it's important. Let's figure out a way that it can be done so that it's fast and agile and not dependent on the agency guidance process, because we can find other ways to acknowledge it without having to create a guidance around that.
That sounds like a proverbial clearing of the throat looking over at ISPE.
That's what I was
I'm not
thinking.
naming anyone.
That wasn't obvious at all.
You know, we're talking about the body of knowledge. This is it, right? This is really one of the groups, one of the many groups that we can actually kick off something like that. So really think about it. And I agree with Cisco. Going through the journey of getting a guidance out is a nightmare. I know when he started, he had total black hair. Look at his hair nowadays. It's a really long process. And I think at the end of the day, people, whatever you give them, right, they're going to raise concern. They're going to raise questions, whether it's a guidance or a white paper or concept paper. I think I'm 100% on board. And Andy, if you want to drive, we'll be your passengers.
Did I just get voluntold for that?
Pretty much. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But this is definitely an ISPE thing. And Lori, I think we should really discuss it and maybe just set it out there, because I think it's a timely issue for really what's going on specifically now. And I want to go back and say about the current software today, it's not what it used to be before, right? A lot of these Part 11 requirements are already built in. Why are we sweating it too much, right? But I think this is something we need to take it offline and discuss it. Would you agree, Lori?
Definitely. Great idea.
Okay, I'll maybe follow up with y'all offline and.
Yep. And
see.
yes, you were voluntold.
Hooray.
Andy,
My
it's
dog
Grace.
disagrees.
It's Grace. I volunteer with you, so bring me
All
along.
right. Awesome.
Fantastic.
See, this is great. All right, let's move on. Got 15 minutes left.
Cisco, way to assign work to us, by the way. Well done.
I just merely gave a suggestion.
Thank you.
All right. So the rules have not changed, right? So Cisco, this is kind of for you, really. Do you smell anything? Is there anything cooking in the back kitchen about a new update to Part 11, maybe?
So there is definite discussion in terms of we've got to finally tackle this issue. It's complex, right? We've been trying to get that, and it's so ingrained because it was the mechanism that, I think in terms of what the agency was looking to do, which was talk about assuring more of the data integrity piece, it's the mechanism that was available. So part of the discussion and the recognition is, yes, it needs to be dealt with one way or the other, right? Update, get rid of, find something else. It's a very entrenched process across the entire agency that is going to take representation from all the centers to tackle and address. And whenever we talk about that, it is a slow process. But it is definitely something that has gotten the focus.
Now, is there anything that the industry perhaps can push for, or again, just like Andy just volunteered, can really the industry do something and help out? Is that a possibility?
Whether or not it's a question, there's a couple of things that need to be done, right? The more the industry voices the issues with Part 11 to the agency, the more impetus they will be to drive the change, right? To push it. So, you know, one thing that I will always say, use those avenues, communicate, send it up to the commissioner's office, send it up to other centers, hell, send it up to the congressman. Whatever it is to get the message out that this rule is having an impact that needs to be targeted and addressed, right? That gets the attention across the agency to actually light a fire under that movement. Mm-hmm. And, you know, articulate, here are the issues it's causing, right? Because if not, people just think it's another just complaint against the rule, but there is a reason that this needs to be updated. Aside from that, until that kind of impetus starts to take off, you know, there isn't going to be a lot of additional discussion or work. But I would imagine that if it's something that is suggested to replace or an update, that the focus would then become something about what it was intended, right? About that data integrity piece. As a collective process with a software that enables, not a software focused rule, right? Which is kind of what part 11 came to be.
Got it. Awesome, thank you. Any comments, any input from anyone or question about that to Cisco?
So again, while we're waiting for some sort of change to come down, you know, we can position ourselves and write that out and explain and define why we're doing things from a Part 11 perspective, which doesn't mean adding in 14 million controls or taking my tablet press and saving every ounce of data that it produces, but doing my assessment up front and looking at what data is relevant to my batch, what is my CPP and CQAs that I need to have data for, right? Doing that upfront work and defining it.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yep.
All righty. And again, this is for everyone, not just Cisco, but Cisco can lead the response. If you have it, if you don't, you're forgiven. Any implication you could think of applying CSA to Part 11?
To me, absolutely none, right? To me, as I mentioned before, the idea of you've got your software, it's got an intended use. If one of those intended uses is, you know, one of those records under that Part 11 portion that's covered, you integrate that into, you know, what you need to make sure of as part of your CSA approach, you know, gets assessed in some way, shape, or form, right? Whether it is the vendor provided you enough information to have confidence in it, whether it is, you know, you did some ad hoc testing on it to make sure that it did the things it needs to do from a control standpoint. Whether you scripted it out, it all becomes part of that initial phase, and the approaches that are outlined in CSA apply. I don't see that there is a implication or a disconnect, but I'm open to any other interpretation around that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
It's Rob Stevenson here. Just my observation, Part 11, the regulation itself does not mention the word risk once. Permission to take a risk-based approach is in the scope and application. And I think what we're really seeing is a big failure to educate and implement risk-based approach, which has been in the Gamp guidance and reinforced by the second edition. So I think it's really how do we get the thinking in CSA into the practice in the organizations, because I think if they really understood what they're being told, a lot of the issues would go away.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I would agree.
100%. Thank you, Rob, for that. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, we can make it easy, we can make it difficult. It's really all up to us. All righty.
We are finding it those, Khaled. It's hard to legislate for common sense sometimes.
Hey, Ray, good to hear your voice, my friend. So I listed, in my opinion, few opportunities here. I'll, share them. I'm not going to go through them and read them, but I think that second one, we really need to understand that a lot of these things have gone beyond, right? Certain things and, sharing password, all these controls are kind of built in. And your vendor today is doing this type of testing, right? So I think some of these things should be really, CSA should be definitely leveraged. And, I keep talking about it as CSA. We're forgetting about Gamp 5 second edition. We're forgetting about data integrity by design, 20-page, chapter about it, right? So it's not just CSA, the guidance that CDRH released, right? It's Gamp now. So I think we should really just, move beyond that a little bit and just what I would like us for the next meeting, for example, if anyone can come up with, you know, I talked about opportunities and I listed technically one application, which really this is the only one I could think of at this point. If a manufacturer implements CSA but fails to follow the applicable regulations, right? It's a guidance. But if anyone really can come up with some sort of cons, right, as to what CSA is doing, not necessarily just to Part 11, to anything else, right, to any reg. And I like what Andy mentioned earlier about, the equipment validation and the qualification, right? Why are we not thinking risk-based approach when it comes to equipment qualification and validation, right? Again, systems are getting better, highly designed, configured, yes, more complex. Try ChatGPT nowadays and see what it tells you. It's crazy stuff out there, right? So I think this is really what I would like from folks who's attending today. If you can just come back just with one slide, we can put it next time. I think Ray is hosting, just to kind of break the ice, talk about it a little bit, and move on to whatever topic we'll be talking about next time.
Khaled, this is
Yes.
Brandy. Wanted to, if you'll go back to the question, or I'm sorry, the one that you just had, I think slide 12. That where you put your one thing. So I did want to kind of reinforce that you can get a finding, right, if you fail to define and follow your processes.
Absolutely.
You say follow applicable regulations, but if you fail to define and follow the process as defined, you also could very well end up with a finding, right?
Yes.
But that does
And
not
actually,
have
I would
anything
argue-
directly related to CSA.
Right.
That's
I would
just-
argue that's the case right here, right?
Yep. That's more often than not, that's what we're going to see. That's my opinion. I am not speaking for any regulator, but that's
No,
my
I
opinion.
actually would agree. More, as I mentioned, if you look at the foundation of regulation, there's not a lot in there, right? That it says you must establish a process, you must document certain things, right? That's basically what it's looking for. But if you establish that process or don't establish it, and then don't, or you do establish it and then don't follow it, then that's where the citation happens.
So it's fail to define and or follow, because you can define it and then not follow it. So if we have to split hairs and tell people that, yes, you could still fail, but it's on them, right? It's on the organizations. Awesome. It's not on the FDA. It's not on one guidance document.
It's on you.
It's on you. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Randy. That's awesome. Awesome. Any questions, any addition here in the meantime? We got 2 minutes. left. Any other comments or questions? You've got Cisco here for 2 minutes. Last call.
Did you say that the next meeting was already planned with an agenda?
Not yet. Ray will be driving it, so I'm not
I'm
sure.
leading the next one, so no. But I'm delighted, Khaled, that you mentioned equipment qualification and the application of CSAs. It's something that's close to my heart.
Yep.
So that's definitely will feature. But other than that, my slate is clean, so I'm open to offers if people want to hear anything at the next meeting.
And
Love it.
also, if somebody wants to present or lead a discussion, please feel free to reach out to any of the steering committee members.
Oh, I'd love that even more. Like, yeah, it'll save me having to talk for an hour. Yeah.
Hey, Ray, I saw a thumbs up from Andy, so he's your friend.
Quick question as someone who's completely new here. My name is
Welcome
Jeff.
aboard.
Thank you. What's the best way to make these suggestions or to follow up on this specific conversation?
Okay. I'll tell you you can reach to any of us here, right? Hopefully you got
So Khaled, Ray, Charlie, or Lori Schussler.
Yep.
Sorry, I gave my last name and nobody else's. Sorry. You could reach out to us directly. There's the ISPE discussion group where you could reach out.
Great.
If you all wanted to, you can put your email addresses in the chat, and then that way people might be able to access them easier.
Sure.
My other suggestion was going to be if you wanted to put like a general comment on the Engage board to go along with the meeting notice. That might be a way that everybody could see it. That was just another thought.
Okay, I will work with Marcy on that. Just for the first question, I would definitely highly recommend, if you don't have the draft guidance, a copy of the draft guidance, you should get one right away. And I'm assuming it's somewhere on the site, Lori or Marcy?
I'm not sure. I'm sure.
Sorry,
think so.
sorry, I'm sorry. Would you repeat the question? I apologize. I'm doing double duty. I got people pinging me on other places too. So I'm very sorry. What was the question?
No, the question, I know the question was, where else can we follow up on this specific topic? So I think the recommendation for those who have not really looked at the guidance is to look at the guidance. There's really tons of material. I'm going to post few things on the site, including the guidance, so that way you can just have a little bit of a history on what's been going on. Sounds like a plan?
Sounds perfect.
Awesome.
But I will also put my email in the chat, and feel free to, if people want to contact us, they can reach out to me.
Yep, and I will include them on the presentation here when you get it.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And thank you for participating. That's awesome.
Good discussion today, guys. Thanks, Khaled and Cisco. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you, Cisco, as always. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Cisco.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Have a good day, everyone.
Take care. Thank you.